I'm Bill Carroll, and I am a contributor to Team MBS Media, Zinni 62 Media, amongst others, a bit of an HBCU football historian, and I am a person who has the great honor of introducing to you to Ricky Watters and telling you why he deserves induction, in my mind, overdue induction to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Richard James Watters was a complete back in an era where there were lots of great running backs. And that's, of course, when people point to things like All Pro, he overlapped 6 or more years of his career with people like Barry Sanders, Thurman Thomas, Emmitt Smith, Eric Dickerson, Darrell Davis. He was in sort of a golden age at the position. But despite that, when you look at him compared to any running backs, he had a stretch of years where from 1994 to the year 2000, he had at least 1,500 scrimmage yards in each one of those years. With the exception of years where he either didn't play because of injury or was in some sort of platoon system where he didn't get enough touches. But once he started getting touches, he ate them up like few others ever before. He led the entire NFL in touches in what was, a truly amazing season in 1996 after he left the 49ers, where he'd been an integral part of their success. Part of it was just his own frustration. He wanted to do more, and he did. He arrives in Philadelphia and is an incredibly important part of that team's success. 404 total touches, 353 of those were carries. He had 9 300-yard receiving seasons. Now, with the exception of specialist backs, guys who were, that's sort of what they did, their niche. There's only a handful of other backs in the history of the game who have that many receiving, 300-yard receiving seasons. Walter Payton is one of them, but Marshall Faulk. But there's not a lot of them, right? He's one of a handful of guys who are that consistently productive in all ways. And the other thing that I think is important is in his 11 playoff games, he produced 12 touchdowns. He played at his very best when his best was needed. He was not a guy who ever disappeared in a playoff game. He also had, of those 11 total touchdowns in 12 total touchdowns, 11 playoff games, 4 receiving, 8 rushing. And he was also a very reliable blitz pickup guy. Even in his quote unquote worst seasons, at least, outside of his last season where he had 425 yards and his rookie season where he didn't play at all because he missed the entire season to injury. But even in his quote unquote worst seasons, here's what he did in his worst seasons, right? In 1994, one of his quote unquote worst seasons, 877 yards rushing, 3.67 yards per carry, which is admittedly it's not great, but he also had 719 receiving yards that season, scored 11 touchdowns. So that in one of his quote unquote worst seasons, he had the 5th most total yards of any running back. And in another one of his quote unquote worst seasons, right? These are seasons where, this is not his best work. He still, in 1997, he had 1,110 yards, was 10th in the NFL. Once again, not a great rushing average, 3.89 yards per carry, but he scored 7 touchdowns, the lowest of his career to that point, outside of the year he missed entirely, but he had 440 receiving yards. So once again, he was still a top 10 rusher, led his team in touchdowns, and had 1,550 yards of scrimmage in his second worst full season of his career. When a player can be that productive in one of their worst NFL seasons, it tells you something. This is a player that somebody said, what they would do nowadays. Think of what they would do nowadays with a guy like Ricky Watters. Now we've seen what people do with people like Christian McCaffrey. We've seen what's happened with guys like Marshall Faulk. It tells you that as great as he was then, he would be great in any era, right? There's not an era where he wouldn't have been great. There was a debate when he was at Notre Dame coming out of the legendary Bishop McDevitt High School, which also Shady McCoy, amongst others, went to. There was a debate if he should play wide receiver. He was that good a receiver. He had hands that good. So he was one of the really pioneering backs who did literally everything. He could be split out wide and run deep routes. He could run all the quote unquote running back routes. He could get you tough yards between the tackles, and he could get outside and run away from people. So for all those reasons, I am nominating Ricky Watters for the Hall of Fame.
Awesome. Well done. Thorough as always.